Welcome everyone to Coffee with Captain aboard our studio, which is our laid up ship Pride of Baltimore 2. This November day, pretty late, soon after Thanksgiving. It's the 28th. We are having very mild, sunny, clear weather right now, on the eve of it probably all going to heck in another couple of days. Our guest here is our executive director, Jeffrey Buchheit. But before we get started with our conversation, Jeff and my conversation, I'd like to reintroduce Jeff Crosby behind the camera, Chief Mate of Pride of Baltimore, and he'll start our show.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving. Jeff Crosby, Chief Mate, not to be confused with Jeff Buchheit, Executive Director. So if y'all have some good nicknames for either of us, throw them into the comments. Captain Miles, what have we been up to this week?
Well, we had a lovely interruption called Thanksgiving. And,
yes.
We were enjoying that in our own separate ways. You have been getting some really ground advance on the galley rebuild, in a sense. It's just one portion of it, the sink area.
That's appropriate for Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's absolutely.
And so I continue to monitor the ship's systems, which we need to keep an eye on, even though we're in a laid up status, and try to stay out of your way and network with all of us, the staff, Jeffrey Buchheit and the staff, with our thinking about next year.
Sure. Yeah. I had actually went home for the holidays about a month ago, so I used this opportunity when everybody is away in a nice, calm, peace and quiet to get some work done here on the ship. So it's been a pretty great holiday for me. All right, Captain Miles, why don't you take it away?
So, Jeffrey Buchheit, Executive Director of Pride of Baltimore, Inc. for now 2 years.
Almost, yeah.
2 years.
February 1st, yeah.
So, how's it feel as you end their second season, second year?
Well, it would have been nice for the second year not to be the pandemic, so that would have been a lot easier. But it feels really good. I mean, I've known about Pride. I feel like I've been a part of Pride of Baltimore for a decade or more, because I was director of the Baltimore National Heritage Area and had been on the ship multiple times. Enjoyed sailing, had multiple experiences with the crew. I knew you. I didn't know if you remembered me or not before that, but so it's kind of like just being in a different way, part of the family. So it feels good.
Well, that raises a question I was going to save till later, but since we've begun the way we've begun, how does your heritage work, which is a long career of multiple focuses and a long time more Baltimore focused, how would you describe Pride of Baltimore's mission in a sort of comparable matchup or yardstick way to all the other heritage efforts that are going on out there, the reasons for these efforts to have sustainability?
Well, I think the reason that I was so thrilled to accept the position of Executive Director for Pride is the fact that, you're right, all those other organizations, all those cultural institutions throughout Baltimore and honestly all of Maryland, they're very important and people love them, but man, Pride of Baltimore too represents not only the history that it represents, but it is such a beloved organization and ship that people throughout the state, it's just easy, and this is going to sound weird, and we're going to talk about Giving Tuesday at some point this morning, but it's easier to fundraise for something that people really care about, and they care about Pride so much. It was really tough as director of the Baltimore National Heritage Area, because we needed to fundraise as well. I mean, we were a nonprofit, but people were like, what's a heritage area? What does that mean? And it's a huge hurdle, to get a level of understanding. But the moment you roll into a conversation about Pride of Baltimore, people know exactly what you're talking about. They may not know all of the history, but they're eager to learn. And so it's just, I think it's right up there with, I'm not going to rattle off certain organizations because then I'll leave some out, but it is an icon for the state of Maryland. So I think that's a good thing.
And what do you think is the international iconic aspect of the story, and how it's received in Maryland or understood in Maryland?
That's actually a really good point, and you and I guess we'll go public with this bit of the fact that you and I have these conversations all the time. I've shared with you that I always have to remind myself that Pride of Baltimore, it's international. It's not just a Baltimore story. It's not just a Maryland story. And the fact that I have to remind myself because it's our level of national significance and what we represent. And I might as well just go ahead and say something about our National Park Service programming that's coming up.
Yeah.
So, we've announced it. It's fine to talk about it. We did the press release, but we have a new relationship with the National Park Service next year because they fully recognize our national and international importance for Pride of Baltimore too. We will be working with the National Park Service next year as a sailing ambassador for the Star Spangled Banner National Historic Trail. And that is not only such a cool thing, but it really elevates. You point out so often to me that throughout the world we are seen, as such an important icon. And the National Park Service recognizes that. So now we have this new relationship with them. We're going to be sailing. I guess I should say what we're going to do. We're just going to have a relationship. We next year we'll be sailing to the Chesapeake Bay and going to at least 10 different ports. And a National Park Service ranger will meet us there, and we'll be part of the programming in those ports. And we'll be offering free day sails and free experiences to families in all of those different communities. So pretty cool, and more to come in the future, I think.
Right, as Baltimore is home to that national shrine, the Star Spangled Banner story, which took place at Fort McHenry. It's a plant. It can't move anywhere. It's physical.
Yeah.
But we can take the story because of that linkage and be a representative to that story, and have been for decades with two different boats. So it's neat to hear that is being seen, that your story is, hey, let's take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And this is something I started with the first boat back in the 70s and well into the 80s, and what triggered the second vessel after the tragic loss is that we want our representation. We want our story to be, first of all, enjoyed by us. Second of all, let's share it. And the Asians, when we were over there, they were flattered beyond words with the realization of our effort to take our example of history and share it. It gave them a great deal of face, particularly the Chinese. They were quite startled with that effort. They didn't understand it. Usually an ambassador is a person, not a vessel. But when they understood it was the vessel and it was our history, and they are proud of their history, and even as short as ours is compared to theirs, the fact that we were willing to share ours was a compliment to them in a very, very personal way. So, and we see that all over Europe because the boat's been that way a bunch of times. So I'm glad to hear that an outsider who's become an insider can say what you're saying, because I think that we're easily trapped in our own, bubble, echo chamber. So that's cool.
Well, and tied to that, if I could go even further with it, so with my history as a museum person, so I've been the director of a museum. I've worked at the American Alliance of Museums in DC. All my history in my career has been working with museums that don't move. They stay there. People have to come to them, and they're always in the same place, except for their presence on the web. Obviously, makes them available throughout the world. But in the grant writing that we're doing, it's been fun to remind myself and our little grant writing team. We have to keep reminding each other, this ship can go anywhere. So this programming, we can reach so many people as we travel. So Kate Marks with the National Park Service. Hey, Kate, if you're watching. She keeps talking about the fact that, for the Star Spangled Banner National Historic Trail, Pride is already an ambassador for the state of Maryland and city of Baltimore. So she keeps talking about us as being a sailing ambassador for the Star Spangled Banner National Historic Trail. And that's pretty cool. It's basically taking the museum to the people. And not many places can do that. So,
particularly with a national story. You see, we see around the country and over in Europe and elsewhere, we see pride in their nation. But what we tell is a coming of age story. And there's the closest that is an example sailing today that talks about a national event that they commemorate is Blue Nose too. Everyone else is talking about an industry or a tradition, but not a national valued event. And in the case of the 1812 War and the Baltimore role in it, and the privateers that were Baltimore schooners built in Baltimore for decades, a century leading up to the 1812 War, were a huge surprise in terms of their ability to do what they did, and they were attractive and appreciated worldwide after the 1812 War. What nation goes against the largest, most powerful naval nation and gets away with it? Well, we're lucky to get away with it, but we're also brilliant in some of the steps we took. And the schooners out of Baltimore were just, they'd been around, but nobody was observing them. That was our tool, trading in the Caribbean, that helped build Baltimore. So we have this explosion of international intrigue with, wow, these people are worth doing business with. And that's this coming of age story in the United States, our own self-identity. People are looking at, hey, we got something to contribute. That's pretty cool. So it goes on and on and on. What other vessel has that connection? Other than a stationary one, you've got Constitution, right. And you've got our World War II stuff and some other wars. But no, this is a traveling story that is a coming of age national story. And it's an intriguing one for everyone around the world. But as the vessel moves, it's a peaceful story. It's a modern marketing story. So we don't see it, no one sees it as a threat. She's too beautiful to be a threat. So anyhow, talk about our Giving Tuesday program.
Yeah, okay. Because everyone, I think most people know what Giving Tuesday is now. It's really been around for a number of years. And I think people are increasingly engaging with it around the world, honestly. So for Giving Tuesday this year, we're super excited about what we're calling our Season of Sustainers. So basically, sustaining donors for Pride of Baltimore are those donors that give on a monthly basis. It's set up so it basically just it's a charge on the credit card, $5 or more, and you're considered a sustaining donor for Pride of Baltimore. The reason this is a big deal, and we have 61 sustaining donors right now at the moment, maybe even more after today, hopefully a lot more after Tuesday. But the reason a sustaining donor is so important is the fact that an example is WYPR, which I was listening to on the way in this morning. They were able to cut their fundraising activity in half because so many people have signed up to be sustaining donors. Because when there's a sustaining support that's coming in on a monthly basis, then you don't have to fundraise as much. So that's why we're really pushing for sustaining donors. But the cool thing, which is really what you were asking, is our campaign, the Season of Sustainers, for those on Tuesday, actually over a period of the next few weeks, during our end of year campaign that sign up to be a sustaining donor. You're going to be entered into 2 drawings. One drawing is to fire a cannon on Pride of Baltimore once we're not undercover. I don't think you can fire cannons undercover, can you?
You can, but it's not as fun.
Right, exactly. Wouldn't be the same impact.
Yeah.
So to fire a cannon next year when we're sailing. And the second one, and this was Jeff Crosby's idea, and it was brilliant, is actually a drawing will be held to be a guest crew on Pride for one of our sailaways here in the Chesapeake Bay. So that is the one that I would want to win. So stay tuned. Those will be 2 really cool drawings, and all you have to do is sign up on Tuesday, on Giving Tuesday, or anytime over the next few weeks to be a sustaining donor, and you'll be entered into one of those drawings. So
that's really cool. Yeah,
Captain Miles, can you talk about what a Chesapeake Bay, a Baltimore to Baltimore Transit looks like?
Yeah. So we're in a sheltered bay. Chesapeake Bay, as big as it is really pretty sheltered. So it's really quite a sublime experience. With a strong wind and a smooth sea, the boat leans over, it goes real fast, and everybody hangs on. But then quite often we're not in a rush to get somewhere, so what we'll do is we'll sail in the daylight, anchor sometime evening time, and then everything just is really a different kind of sublime. It's quiet. It's an island all by itself, nearby shore. And it's an island community. We're going to be, when we're fully loaded, we're 12 crew and we're 6 guest crew. We're 18 people, and it's a little camp in a sense. It's and of course, with the galley being a main central part of our midships down below, that's a conversation area as well as an activity area. The work of sailing the boat, though, is very vigorous, and so for the crew on a day of agile sailing and the guest crew, you've used a lot of muscles. You've for those who are new, you probably developed a blister, and you feel exceedingly accomplished at the end of the day and happy to gorge on the food and go right to sleep. And yet there's always this twilight, this period of dawn and at anchor or evening at anchor as we get to the twilight. There's most of the places we anchor are just finding a lee. So that's usually not a cove. That's usually a roadstead in a sense. And so land is close to one portion of the horizon, and then it's further and further away. So you get a really great sight line of your sunrise, set and sunrise. And many of the times we're in a place that the the civilized lighting situation is not really powerful. So your sky, when it's clear, or even in broken cloud, you get a really good look at the stars and the bodies up there. So now sometimes we're at anchor hiding from a howling breeze. That's another experience. That's really cool because you feel safe. Oh, we're safe. But you're always looking out, being on deck and getting your hair knocked off, your hat blown away. But you're so, because you've been out for it for a while and you just come in, or you can sort of sense that it would be wild out there. So you're just like, oh, this is pretty cozy. This is pretty nice right here. So
the other cool thing about the Chesapeake Bay Sailways is you don't know where you're going to go, right? I mean, it's kind of...
Yeah, okay, yeah, exactly. The Sailways, when we're going from Baltimore back to Baltimore, we know where we're going.
Right.
And we know where...
You might have never...
And we know when we're going to get there, God willing, the creek don't rise. So it's all about what's in between.
Right, exactly.
Right, but that in-between bit is very much just weather dependent, and we make the most of it.
Oh, yeah.
But that might have been a seed of an idea, though. Imagine Giving Tuesday, you win the prize, and you're going to be dropped off somewhere. You don't know where. It might be Bermuda. It might be Martha's Vineyard. Right, exactly.
Yeah,
that part's on you.
Yeah, we do have transit. So if this drawing is not restricted in terms of the sail away, yes. So for instance, we're looking in 2021 to doing some get out of the Chesapeake Bay transits, and that's when we have a deadline, and it's calculated based on what we have come to know as the performance of the boat under sail. So going back to the business of a round trip, we're always sailing. We're trying not to use the engine at all, but there's a generator to keep the batteries every now and again pumped up. So when we're doing a voyage, a transit to a destination with an obligation in a port, that's when you're going to see us take light weather, and we're going to motor for a while until we get some sailable weather. Sometimes it's a sailable weather, but it's so light that we'll keep motoring in order to get ahead, so that we can then go real slow and real sailing and not be falling behind. Sometimes it's a windy start, in which case we'll sail a bunch, get way ahead. The wind will die out. We'll keep sailing for a while because we're way ahead. So these are, and then sometimes we're running the coast. If we're going up to southern New England, there might be a reason to pull off to the side because we're got the time, right, and find a place to lay over. So you never know what's going to happen in between, other than we have this responsibility to arrive at an indicated place at an indicated time, and what happens in between is ours to make the most of.
And always different.
Yes. So so Jeff, what do you think it's like, Chief Mate, Pride of Baltimore 2, with the experience of sailing in the bay?
Baltimore to Baltimore transits are some of my favorite because of everything that you just described. Sailing as much as we possibly can. Trying not to use the engines. Returning to the same destination. So it's just a much more relaxed atmosphere. Anchoring every night. People get to experience life under sail, life at anchor. Usually you're still within cell phone range, so you're not completely out of contact, but you forget about it for the whole day. So it's just a really fun, unique perspective and a great way to see the bay.
Yeah. So, Jeffrey, share with us anything that's been sort of really curious for you now that you've been in the saddle for 2 years, coming on 2 years.
Well, I think, and I referred to it some earlier, is just the fact of what a joy it is to promote and talk about Pride of Baltimore 2 in the organization. I think what people don't realize is what a small group of people makes this possible. I mean, like a lot of other organizations, I was referring to the other icons that I'm not going to say by name in Baltimore because I'll leave someone out and then they'll be all upset. But those other icon institutions have, dozens and dozens of staff members, some of them 100+ staff members. Pride doesn't. Pride has 3 office staff and 12 crew. And that
3
group,
is including you.
It does. That 3 includes me. And that little group makes all of this happen. And that is pretty darn unique. There's, of course, if we had the ability to have more staff, we could do even more. But, what we do accomplish with a small group is, I think, pretty darn amazing. And honestly, I don't even know. You may know, like other tall ships, like where we fall in the spectrum of that. I'm thinking we're probably pretty normal.
Yeah, in terms of one ship activities, that's true. There's when you get into more than one ship, then it's a little bit dependent upon what their mission is. So so tall ships is a phrase that's gone completely wild. First of all, I feel sorry for John Masefield with the poem Sea Fever. This is a famous poem. It's probably as well known as any. The phrase, "All I want is a tall ship and a star to steer her by," is an emotion at a time when commercial freight carrying sail was on the wane and commercial freight carrying auxiliary motor vessels was on the ascent. And you take those 2 kinds of vessels, this is late 1800s, early 1900s, and you put them alongside each other. One's going to be tall because of the masts, the sail power to carry the cargo. One's going to be low. So it's an emotion about all I want is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. Well, today, tall ship can be any dinghy with a mast on it. So there are tall ships out there that are commercial carriers. We have one very well-known one in Annapolis, Woodwind, and 2-masted schooner. There's a couple of them, but they're small staff and they're very active. But then we have, and up in Maine, there are these private operations for doing not guest crew, but sort of more like a dude ranch experience. You come aboard, you don't have to sail, but it's good sightseeing because you're sailing every day, you're at anchor every night. The food is tremendous. So the Penobscot Bay area, the Windjammer fleet up in Maine. But then and then of course there's the education groups. Now that's where we get into some bigger staff, and particularly the biggest one would be Sea Education Association. They've got 2 schooners. They're university level programs. They're aligned with the university system, so they're a huge operation by comparison in terms of a scale. But in terms of one ship operation, one of the difficulties with this mission is it's not just carrying a bunch of people. This mission is so much more the ambassadorial thing. It's we're the hand holders for anyone who charters the vessel for the purposes of their company or state or city agency, making the most out of relating to their friends and clients and possibly attracting new clients. So we become the PR directors of partners with them. Setting up a port arrival on our own, that is a news event, grandstanding in, shooting the cannons, that gets on the air, that turns the RSVPs. The invitations go out on paper, right? They go out a month ahead, right? Well, classic RSVP rate is 70-odd%. Well, when you blow into the news media and you're doing this and that, and they discover that they have an exclusive invitation to this story that just sailed and blew into town, boom, 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 that's when the RSVPs go north of 100%. And so that leveraging of relationship building and reputation building and preservation is requires the staff a heck of a lot of extra work. I mean, this pandemic year is great for planning, but every year that we're usually operating, that's when the staff are doing a lot of just handling the day-to-day communication. Is a client is asking where's the boat going, and port arrangements and what have you. So yeah, it's a small staff and we could do so much more if we could actually support a bigger staff.
You know, you just actually tickled on an idea that viewers may be interested in. What's made this year so unique, one doesn't want to say one's enjoyed anything during the horribleness of the pandemic, but a nice silver lining, if you want to call it, and I hate even saying that.
It's making lemonade out of lemons.
Making lemonade out of lemons is that we've all been able to work together in a unique way that hopefully we'll never have, I guess, that opportunity again. But we've really, the 3 office staff, chief mate and captain, over the last 6-7 months have really been able to work together on planning for next year, having lengthy conversations about what that looks like. We don't normally have that opportunity because usually when you guys are like either preparing to sail or sailing or winterizing the ship, there's not a whole lot of extra time.
There isn't, and one great example is, and I've been with the program so long that I've seen this come and go a number of times. Yeah. Business of what do we carry on the ship that is a display, and where does it go? On the ship, alongside the ship. And over time, there's the ebb and flow of, are we going to display current events? Are we going to, in addition to the historical, and then what format does the historical get? Because it's a dense history, it's a dense activity, so who's going to read all this stuff? So there's that conversation, and this year there's been a great deal more concentrated imagining as to the physical nature of what we carry on the ship because we have limited space. What's the fiddly aspect of setting it up? The crew are the crew of the boat. They're not the crew of a display. So they're wearing
two signage crew.
So there's 2 hats going on here, of just among many hats that the crew shift through between being docents and during public visits and being part of the day sail operations, as well as maintenance, the care of the ship. So that design concept of, wouldn't it be neat to have this display? Okay, how does it collapse? How does it get assembled? How long does it take? How many bits and pieces go with it? Because we've just grandstood into town. We're on a tight schedule to get the day done so that people can lay down for the next day, which is going to be dockside and public. So you've got to have 4 people do it for 3 hours. I'm sorry, that's tough to do. That's tough to incorporate. So we need to be a different display design, and that goes back to the art. So it's a wonderful opportunity this year to focus on that in a way, in an intensity we've never been able to focus before. During a normal year-to-year operation, these ideas come up, but then everybody gets busy.
Yeah, and what makes me, I don't want to say sad, because I'm excited that we're going to be preparing to sail next year, like now. That window's already closing, so like we won't, we're already at the end of it. We're going to have a few more weeks, and you're going to be crewing up, and of course we always talk, and we always have conversations, and we're always working together. It's just that we haven't, this unique time during this last 6 months has been like really, really cool. But
lemonade out of lemons.
Out of lemons, yep.
So, got another anecdote?
I like lemons too, though.
All right.
So that saying's always been confusing to me, but anyway.
So one of the things that we've got looking at next year, which I'm excited about, but it is an international voyage in late summer, is Blue Nose 2 is commemorating 100 years of the launching of the original Blue Nose for the competitions of the fishing schooner competitions between the United States and Canada. So we're looking to get up there in August. We had Captain Phil Watson of the Blue Nose 2, who is the current captain, in a conversation a couple weeks back. And it was fascinating to hear what they went through in a thinking process about, do we or don't we sail? What kind of tales can you share about that conundrum for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, we navigated that together, this summer. So, of course, that was painful for all of us to decide that what was best for Pride and what was going to work for Pride of Baltimore 2 was to winterize the ship and not sail during 2020.
Especially because we were already crewed up and already sailing.
Yeah, ready to go. I mean, we were there. But also we were, like, if we're honest with ourselves, we were so early on in the pandemic. There were just so many variables. Not there aren't now, but I feel like as a society, we at least understand what we're grappling with. Early on, I mean, there were unknowns that, I don't even want to think about those early couple of months.
In fact, Captain Watson made that point in our conversation. He said, we watched what Pride of Baltimore 2 was doing because the season doesn't change up there in Nova Scotia as soon as it does down here. So we were already launched, as Jeff Crosby just described, and operating when the crisis factor really took root. They could watch the crisis factor unfold. They could decide to postpone startup of rigging, which is in March.
You're right.
We start in April, I think, March, April, more than a month after we start. So they postpone, and then between the authorities, the national authorities discussing how to protect the country, and that organization and the backers of that organization and the province leaders, they could have a significant conversation, monitoring what's going on, weighing the question of that iconic symbol being taken to the various coast ports and coast areas, and that's what they did eventually. They did a celebrate our history cruise, and so I think that we've answered that to ourselves for 2021.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and you make a good point. I mean, every ship was in a different place. The timetable for every organization is different. And, the thing that, I don't know if we've even talked about this, but the thing that was keeping me up at night during those first couple of months is I was scared to death that the crew was going to get sick. I was just, so the idea of the public, and we hadn't had the time to wrap our minds around fully what does that look like in, sailing in a different way and not our normal, like bringing on, people for guest crew and day sails and, dockside, big experiences.
So in 2021, us being able to sail around, I think really is valid without direct engagement with the public because of the arrangements we can make about showing off the boat for the public, making an announcement of where that's going to happen, when that's going to happen. We do that. We know how to sail the boat in pretty tight quarters. And then when it comes to being dockside, with this display discussion that we're having, is that we can maintain social distancing with the public on the dock and the crew on the boat.
Yep.
And then when it becomes a little more confidence that we have everyone's safety more or less in hand, we can maybe do a more intimate relationship. But the beginnings is Pride sailing again, Maryland is sailing again, Baltimore is, and the National Shrine is being represented again, visually, noisily. Got to have those noise.
There's also the virtual aspects.
Yeah.
Due to our lovely viewers who watch us weekly during this program, it's become pretty apparent to us that whatever we do virtually will engage people, and people will participate that way.
Well,
so there's always that.
Yeah, Jeff, very good point. Uprig is no simple matter.
Yeah.
So we're going to be able to, you and I, along with others, be able to highlight. I've done it so often, it's a big like, it's like, oh boy, here we go again.
That's what you're going to say.
Yes, but other people will be able to participate live in the drama.
Because you see, the captain, what's the captain thinking about is, okay, I'm going to want to do this with the ship. Is the equipment set up the right way for doing that? Because when you have topmast up there, when you have all the rigging set up for tension, and you lay all this sail area sharp, sharp, sharp trim, and you got a decent breeze, one of the things in my mind is okay, have we really got the boat prepped properly? And so during uprig, I'm a hound to those who are actually doing it, so that they really are not falling short of understanding the critical nature of the setup. Now, we do safety training on board. Every vessel does. We do systems check. We review the watertight integrity of the ship, capabilities. We get familiar with the ship. But the thing that's sort of invisible is, and Jeff knows this very, very well, that head rig comes under a lot of strain, so you got to pre-tense that. That top hamper with the square topsail, you got to pre-load that, because there's the amount of stretch, the iconic nature of these vessels back in the day. Rope boats, there's stretch and then there are rope boats. So the initial shakedown sailing that we do with the crew is where we really discover if we've done it right. And sometimes we've had to go back and say, we got to redo that. And then during the season, we can be confident. But that's where my role in is, okay, they want to do it, they want to prove they can do it, and we still got to look at it. Got to still check on it.
Here's a question for you. Like, now that it's the end of November, beginning of December, have we now caught up? Is this how the ship would be at this point on a normal year?
Well, okay, this is what it looks like at the beginning of a layup. So we've downrigged.
Okay, right.
And what's different about this downrig scenario is what we do not have to look forward to is going over to where the spars are and doing a full-on re-maintenance that goes on between back-to-back seasons. Because our season was so short this spring,
right.
Other than some cleanup and maybe a final coat for protection, it's ready to go. So typically in a wintertime, we would hire a half a dozen people who would, if it's a November downrig, we might start them in December or waits until the first of the year. And then there's crazy full-on work on that. And then when the crew come aboard, we go from a 40-hour week pattern and nobody's living on board the boat to a 7-day-a-week pattern, and it's 8 to 10-hour days, full on, with no time off, full on getting everything, because we're just-in-time delivery. That's the cost factor that goes with these kinds of situations. So that's the difference with this layup. Now, come January, we will be bringing on some 40-hour people who are more in the skills area to sort of double-check systems and to do any specific skill-related work. We've got some caulking to do on deck, so that's a labor-intensive, but it's a focusing one. You have to know what you're doing. You can't just, here's some sandpaper, there you go. It's on paint, it's a much more fiddly thing, but it's also pretty rudimentary. It's simple to learn, but it's demanding great diligence in its execution. So we want to do some of that. But then in early to mid-February, we'll crew up, and once we get ship familiarization from the point of view of safety and understanding of our culture, then it's going to be full-on checking the spars for their condition, get them hoisted up. So there's a bit of a parallel, but it's a bit unique. But what we look like right now is we're done with downrig, everything's ashore that needs to be ashore, and the ship is breathing. It's opened up and there's fans going, and so we're looking for another 3 months before we go live aboard, which shuts everything down because of the temperature.
So,
Were you asking time period wise?
Yeah, like at the end of November, is this the state that the ship would normally?
I think that varies a little bit.
Yeah. Well, dry dock impacts it, I'm sure.
Do you
so.
want to talk about that?
oh yeah,
No,
dry
it would
dock.
probably be downrigging or dry docking.
Right. Yeah. The pattern of dry dock sometimes is springtime, sometimes is fall. We're in currently a fall pattern annually. We have the ability to stretch that annual story out to 2 years. So when we're going back-to-back seasons, we stick with annual because the power of the rig is such a load on the ship that we need to keep up with all that. But when we've had this layup, we can stretch it out. So that's our plan. So the next dry docking is not till late 2021. That experience, if we're live aboard still, that's another intense period of time. It's full on 7 days a week, doing things relative to the ship that's unique to being out of the water. So underwater maintenance caulking and what have you, and there's a lot to do with that. And then the yard follows up with the final coatings that go on the boat before it goes back in the water. There's the drivetrain scenario, shafts, propellers, they're all checked and what have you. So, but sometimes, occasionally, we'll do a dry dock when we're not live aboard. And that can be rather stressful because we don't have the extra crew around to just go do this, go do that. We have
paint.
Yeah, yeah. So that we've managed it. I mean, we do. That's what you do. You'll flex to the reality of the situation. So that can be, from a leadership point of view, and from a cost and budget point of view, that can be a bit of a shock. Because when we go hourly, when we're not live aboard, we're in an hourly phase generally, and that can be hard.
Like 10 years ago, we'd participate in the parade of lights, the Christmas parade of lights.
Oh,
which
right,
was in
right.
December.
Yeah.
So there's been some late in the year activities.
Right. For viewers that haven't seen us for a while, I just want to encourage everyone to come and see us next year when it's safe and when it makes sense for you. Because I don't know if I've shared this with you guys, I've had friends tell me that in the last year or two, with the combo of Captain Miles and Chief Mate Jeff Crosby, the ship has never looked better. So, this combination that we have of talent and experience is just, you got to come and see us. So, next year.
Don't get tired, Jeff.
All right.
Okay.
Carry the load. Carry the load. Oh, the captain's useless. Carry the load. He's just full of ideas. And speaking of ideas, we're also talking about a request to go to Bermuda. Now, Andy Schell is the person who has made the idea.
Who's Andy Schell?
Andy Schell is with Latitude 59. Is that what that group is called?
Yes. It's something of that.
Yeah. So anyway,
Ice Bear and Ice Bjorn.
yeah, he has two vessels that does a guest crew kind of thing, very participatory, but they're in 48 to 55 foot length vessels, modern vessels. And they sometimes race them, but otherwise it's engaging as a person paying for the opportunity. It is being the cruisers of the vessel or the racers team of the vessel. So this year we were going to be doing the Annapolis Bermuda race, which got canceled.
Yep.
And they were participating. So Andy came up with the idea is hey, you guys, maybe in 2021, if you're sailing, we would commemorate during the off year of the Annapolis Bermuda race. Mm-hmm. How about Pride of Baltimore and one of our vessels do a race between Annapolis to Bermuda, informal. And so we're talking about doing that in early June. They've already done a transit this year a couple of times to Bermuda, so the protocol from the point of view of the pandemic has been established for Bermuda and is under constant review, of course. So, we spend 4 or 5 days getting there, a minimum of 3, and we're not having any experience along with whatever the procedure is to create the safe universe that would be the ship, then Bermuda has been having their own protocol. So we're looking forward to that as a possibility. So from a guest crew for the drawing, for the
You don't get to win a Bermuda on that. It's a local sail away.
Oh, it's a local sail away. Okay.
Yeah, that's 59 North, as Andy showed.
59 North. That's it. My apologies, Andy. 59 North.
What are some other things that are being discussed about next year? Granted, it's going to be pretty fluid depending on what the pandemic is doing.
Sure. Well, definitely the new exhibits that we've been talking about. That'll go live next year. We got to get all that work done this winter, and the time is going to fly by. But sailing with the National Park Service to those 10 different ports throughout the Chesapeake Bay. Captain Miles has already mentioned Bermuda, potentially Martha's Vineyard. I mean, I don't know how much I should share publicly. So,
well, southern New England in
Right.
general.
Right.
Nova Scotia, assuming Canada will let Americans come in.
So we're in that window right now where next year's schedule is really like on a weekly basis, like filling in. But the neat thing is that we'll be sailing, thank goodness. And we've got all the safety protocols in place. You know, those meetings are happening, as you guys know. And you know, I think it's going to be a pretty exciting year for us. So, and I think a lot of people are really looking forward to seeing us out on the water.
And that's two things. As much as we sailors like to get out of the Chesapeake Bay, we're going to spend quite a bit of time racing around Maryland portion of the Chesapeake Bay to, here's your pride, take a look. Boom, we'll surprise you with a boom. So, yeah, so that's going to be neat because that means a lot of movement. The crew want to sail.
Yeah.
They're happy to be a storyteller. They're proud of their stories too, but they want to go sailing. So movements around the bay with the National Park Service or on our own for whatever reasons, that'll be good for all of the reintroduction of the ship, reintroduction of Maryland symbolism and Baltimore symbolism, and get outside of the bay to say, don't forget Baltimore and Maryland.
Well, I think people are going to see us, you know, now that we've learned, you know, the pandemic forced all of us as a society to really ramp up our virtual programming and our virtual experiences. And so we're going to be doing stuff like this, which we weren't doing constantly before. We're going to keep doing it. So next year, you know, if you can't come and see us live, you're going to be able to keep engaging with us in a virtual way, which is really cool. As long as Jeff Crosby's willing to to do it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Talk about multi-talented.
Right.
Shipwright, metalsmith,
Facebook Live MC.
Producer of shows. So, well, thank you very much, Jeffrey, for taking time to talk about Pride Inc. Out of your very busy administrative responsibilities. And personally, it's been a pleasure to see you wrap Pride of Baltimore up into that confidence that you have about the next steps. Mm-hmm. It's a big trick. I've watched a number of executive directors pass through Pride Inc. And I've sat in the chair as a temporary placeholder. I can tell you that when I sat in that chair, it was horrifying. I was so glad to get out of that chair. It was an education. I had no idea what my reaction would be, but when I sat in that chair, it was horrifying. So, so thank you for being willing and able to sit in that chair.
Well, it's a real pleasure. I mean, it has been a real joy, and it's like being home. So it's really cool, and it's great to have such wonderful people to work with. And next year is going to be amazing. So
yeah.
We're all excited about that.
And so, everybody, thank you for joining us in our winter layup studio aboard Pride of Baltimore 2. And Chief Mate Jeff Crosby.
Yeah, just once again, thank you for joining us this morning. I just want to do a huge shout out for those of you that have donated. That helps keep these programs running. And if you are looking for some unique Christmas gifts, please head over to our website, pride2.org. We have things like t-shirts, we have Christmas ornaments that are really awesome. So pride2.org, hats, other items, go to the website, check out our merch. Every little bit helps us with our mission. And Jeffrey, it's been awesome having you this morning and great working with you. And Captain Miles, parting words?
Stay diligent, everyone.